Happy Tuesday, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Beth Griesbauer. I'm Vice President of Sales here at Ivy.ai. And I have the pleasure of introducing or passing it off for an introduction to Penny and Glenna from Penn State University. So I'm going to hand it off to you all. Do a quick introduction before we jump into the good stuff. Glenna?
Hi, everyone. Glenna Emmel. I'm the operations manager for the Penn State IT service desks and desk side support team. During our Ivy initial implementation, I was on the RFP team. During the implementation phase, I was the functional sponsor for the service desk implementation. And now in production, I am the AI or chatbot service owner for all of the bots that live at Penn State now. Penny?
Hi, everyone. Penny Hockenberry. I've been at Penn State doing some sort of customer support management for over 20 years, we'll say that. As far as our implementation goes, I was involved as the project manager for the implementation and also in the maintenance part of it, the ongoing maintenance and production part of it, the team lead and helping our team, making sure that our bot is doing what we expect it to do, and also service manager along with Glenna, who's the service owner on just Penn State's overall chatbots implementations.
Great, thank you. So today we have the opportunity to learn from Penny and Glenna about the process they went through at Penn State University to choose a chatbot vendor in a world that's full of chatbots and AI these days. We'll get to hear from them firsthand what their considerations were, what they were thinking about when they went through and started thinking about, hey, we need some sort of chatbot solution. We'll talk about what the implementation looked like, how they measure the return, how do they know if it's working, how do they know if they're achieving those goals they identified prior to going forward in this journey, and how do they maintain the bot to make sure it's continually improving. And then, of course, at the end, we'll save some time for some questions and answers. So with that, let's start by talking about when considering a new tool, right? You all at Penn State decided, you know, we know we need some sort of chatbot solution. And so what were those, I'll call them pains that you were experiencing, and what were the goals that you had in mind when considering, you know, to go down this path and take this journey? Glenna, do you want to share your experience?
Sure. So a pain is the right word, right? So some of the things that we were seeing at the IT service desk, and that was the first bot that stood up at Penn State, was an IT service desk tier 1 bot intended to answer those types of questions. The pain that we were seeing is that the service desk team was at max capacity. We were doing all intake types. So we had phone, we had live agent chat, and we had email and ticket intake. The team was maxed out, and our customer experience wasn't where we wanted it to be. And that looked like we had longer than desirable wait times, especially during peak periods like fall semester start, which of course resulted in a weaker customer experience. And our agents were burning out. They had been running at max capacity for a while. So it wasn't an image that we wanted. So we looked at that, and we looked at our different intake types, and chat was our longest handle time. At the time, it was running about 16 minutes on average per chat. And so we started, you know, how do we solve this problem? How do we deal with those, as Beth says, pain points? So we started by creating a very, very clear goal so that we could make all of our decisions around that goal. Chat, any kind of a bot, whether it's a voice bot or a chat bot, has the potential to have a massive amount of scope creep. So we created a very, very targeted goal, and we made all of our decisions focused on that goal to ensure that success. And our goal for the IT implementation was to increase the agent's bandwidth, right, to give us, you know, less workload on our live agent staff without negatively impacting our customer experience. So those were really two things that we focused heavily on: less work but still maintaining a positive customer experience.
Sure. Yeah, of course. And were there any particular non-negotiables or specific considerations when you think about, okay, we're going to go and we're going to dive in and participate in this RFP process, which everyone loves, I know. But what were those things that, we know we need this, and this, as a baseline?
So those non-negotiables kind of fall in my brain a little bit into criteria, right? So a non-negotiable is accessibility. There are federal mandates on accessibility for those with disabilities, right? We had existing tools. We are a ServiceNow support center, so we needed it to play nicely in the Penn State sandbox as well as the ServiceNow sandbox, because that's where our team lives. But some of the other things that we're going to talk about criteria, I know, in a minute, and you can kind of see a little more clearly what those kind of very specific criteria were. But some of the things that I think were super important to us fall kind of into considerations for us. Um, we were focused on scalability. We were standing up a tier 1 IT support bot, but Penn State's very, very large. For those of you who might know the scope of the university, it has 24 campuses. And within those campuses, we have administrative and academic units. So we needed something that was going to be scalable, that was going to be able to be branded appropriately, but also flexible enough to meet the needs of each of those types of organizations. So those were really important to us, as well as our agent experience was extremely important to us at the service desk. We have a very, very high volume. We did not want to add another tool to our service desk agents toolbox. They were already seriously multitasking. We didn't want to add something new, so it needed to play within our processes and the tools we were already using. And we needed very strong vendor support. The reason for that is we didn't know what we were doing. I'll be honest to say, this was the first bot that came to Penn State, and we didn't have internal skill sets, right? So we needed a vendor that was going to provide a lot of vendor support in not only implementation, but long-term support and success, because we didn't have it internally. And if we had to create the infrastructure and hire those individuals that might have that skill set, it would impact us financially, and the ROI would have been a great deal lower. So those were some considerations that we kept in mind outside of those, like you said, Beth, the non-negotiables, right? It's got to fit in our system. It's got to be appropriately secure. It's got to, those types of things.
So I love, let's jump into that a little bit more, the whole process. And so you said something that I think is really important, which is it scalable, right? You knew that you had specific needs for IT, but as you look at the big picture and providing this unified long-term communication experience for your customers, who do you include in this process to identify a vendor? Who were those people that ultimately made the choice to choose Ivy and move forward with them?
Right, and that's how we built our RFP team. We understand we all can't know everything about everything, so we made sure that we had the right people at the table who could ask the right questions and make sure that our scorecard, our criteria document that we used, was fleshed out enough. So in the left, you can see some of our criteria, right? We were very focused on user experience, and I know Penny's going to talk about how how we thought through that and how we decided how we wanted the bot to behave. We needed one that was self-learning to lower that administrative overhead. Our team was already maxed out, right? Giving them more work kind of would have defeated the purpose, so we needed one that was going to be able to learn to do some of that self-learning. Integrations, that one's always an interesting word. We needed the right people at the table to translate what that word means, right? Integrations means something to me, and it means something very different to those people in security and enterprise architecture, right? We needed all of those representatives there to ask the right questions to make sure that it was integrating the way we needed it to. Availability, we are a 24/7 tier 1 service desk, so we needed to know what was going to be working, right? When we're at work, and when we do close 3 days a year, that it was going to work when we weren't at work. Those types of things. And of course, like I said, there's a federally mandated accessibility requirements for academic institutions. So we needed to make sure that we were checking all the boxes. We were also fortunate enough in our RFP team to include some of those colleges and campuses because our Tier 1 service desk, though it is not completely centralized at Penn State, we do have a lot of Tier 1 partners, and we wanted our partners to have a say. So we provide Tier 1 support for many of the 24 campuses and academic colleges, and we wanted them to have a say because their students and faculty were going to be interacting with this bot. And there was one other bot at the university, and we wanted that person to come to the table as well, who had stood up that bot. They were using it in a very different way, but they understood the vocabulary of bots better than we did. So we made sure we brought them to the table. And then our implementation team was represented there to make sure that not only were we choosing a bot that Penn State as an organization could use, but the bot was going to meet the IT service desk needs. So we had our core RFP team, and I was part of that team. I was the functional sponsor for the service desk during this implementation. And then the RFP team, once we evaluated the RFP submissions and selected our top candidates, we moved on to the vendor demos, and then the people that attended that were even larger, right? So we allowed end users to come, and we had representation from faculty, staff, and students to be there and to provide us feedback to make sure that we were thinking of all of the things that we weren't thinking of. I know it's a slightly ridiculous sentence, but you know what I mean. They brought a different perspective to the table.
Absolutely. No, I think that's really important, to have, because everyone has their different objectives and in their day to day. So I think that's hugely important. So, let's continue on, Penny. If you could, so, you've all chosen a vendor. Talk to me about kind of what was your strategy with implementation, and what did that process look like, right? You selected a vendor, and now it's time to put this thing in motion.
Right. Well, actually, Ivy was integral in this part with us after we selected Ivy. So we built a project team. We had members from our service desk. That was our first focus. We wanted to stay really focused on the IT bot as round one. So we developed a scope of work with Ivy's support on that. We really concentrated heavily on the customer experience. What did we want that customer experience to be? And also our agent experience. What did we want them to experience as well? We pulled in some of our, on the integration side, we had to go and find out who the service experts were for those, pulled them in. Ivy had a great conversation with them, connected the dots on the technical side, talking that technical language with those folks. And we really talked about the customization preference form that Ivy provided for us, the checklist they provided for us, and really helping us develop that timeline, which we can go into if you want to.
Yeah, I would love to. Well, if you could give us a high level of kind of how that unfolded, and also, would you consider anything that happened to be, I'll call them critical decisions, right? Was there any point in the implementation where you're like, oh, okay, we maybe didn't think of this, or this is a really important thing. Let's make sure we're aligned on this.
Yes. Right off the bat, what would happen when we were closed? As Glenna said, there's just small times of the year. So we really wanted to say, what is that customer experience going to be when on the times we're closed? What's that customer experience going to be when the bot can't answer the question? What did we want to offer, to call us, to go tell live agent? What are the options we wanted there, and how did we want those systems to integrate and talk to each other? Some of the other things was the branding, we wanted the high level, wanted to make sure that we could launch this out. That was one of the overall arching goals for the future state. Making sure we had good branding that would match all of Penn State solutions, regardless of what area wanted that. So those are some of the key critical decisions that we had to make right off the top, so that everything was aligned and ready to go.
Yeah, great. I love that, because then moving forward, as you scale, you have this framework in place, right? And you're eliminating that wild west potential. So in terms of the timeline, Penny, when it's all said and done, what did that look like? And I know we're all kind of looking at it, but can you speak to it a little bit?
Sure. The RFP, I believe, took around 8 months. So that was from beginning from us writing the RFP, working with our internals to get it out to vendors and so forth. So that whole selection process took about 8 months. The implementation process was about 5 months. And again, we used Ivy a lot in this part of it to help us build that timeline. Just asking, what to expect, how much time should we put in the planning side, how much on the integration side, those kinds of things. And we really focused on when did we, as an academic cycle, that's what we focused on. When did we want to launch? So we set a target to make sure we weren't interfering with peak periods as semester starts or finals or whatnot. So we really set a target of when we wanted to launch and worked backwards in that aspect with, what are the experiences, the communications plan, how did we want to communicate this? Who did we need to get involved from the larger scale as far as the branding, and how we work backwards in developing that timeline. So the implementation was about 5 months. We also critically decided to just do a soft launch. We did not want to hey, here it is, go try it. And it was really hard to keep our leadership at bay during that soft launch. We did a 1 month soft launch, which was just, us testing the waters, getting it out there, not really telling anyone that was there, typically our agents were using it. We really enforced them to use that as a customer would. If they're getting a chat or a question, go ask the bot as well. See if the bot's going to give you the right answer. We really focused on our high volume questions first. We started really small. We selected our 5 questions that people ask all the time that have the same answers. So how do I reset my password? It can be asked a million different ways. It still comes up with the same answer. This is the process. One thing that we had in place was our knowledge base ahead of time. So we could just really reference that knowledge base and pull information from there. And then we did about 3 months of monitoring after we did that soft launch. Again, really focusing on those high level 5 questions that we wanted to get right before we really went into our production mode. So overall, it was about, after the RFP, about 8 months from implementation planning to production.
That's great. And did you feel as though, you were able to work the process at your pace? Were you held to, was it that flexible, or did you feel as though it was here's the timeline and this is how we have to do it? Or did you feel like you were able to pivot and make adjustments in conjunction with Ivy in order to make things work?
Yeah. We set a target far enough in advance during that non-academic period, and then worked our way backwards, which really allowed a lot of time in there to make adjustments and working with Ivy to be flexible. Oh, okay, well, we set a month to do this and we could have had it done in 2 weeks, just making sure we allotted for time between there for anything that may come up.
Right. Thank you. So let's talk about what happens after the bot was launched, right? So, the bot, it's built, it's installed, it's implemented. Glenna, talk to me about what you had in place as you were implementing, and what the metrics were that you identified to use to measure the efficacy, to measure the impact, to see is this thing working? Is it doing what we need it to do? Or is it doing what we want it to do?
Sure. I focused the metrics that I was reporting on, like Penny said, is when you buy something, there is leadership is very anxious to see the results, right? And so we made sure that those results were being provided at the correct time. But again, ROI is of course a big thing, especially when you're buying a new tool. And in this case, we measured our ROI by utilizing our deflection rate. And you can see that they have some of our deflection data here from 2023. We had an exceptional deflection rate at this point. It has grown over time, and it's in a really, really great space. We take the deflection rate, the number of chats that do not reach a live agent. That is what we consider deflection. Those chats that hit the Ivy chatbot but do not request a live agent transfer. We use the handle time for those bots that do that don't transition over, which would have been that 16-minute, right? That would have been in the old world. The average was 16 minutes. And then we take that, and that's what translates here at the bottom of this table on the right, the hours in agent time in 2023. That's a lot of hours. And then we utilize our average cost per minute for our agent staff to determine what our ROI looks like for the bot. And in this case, in 2023, it was about an average of 2 FTEs. So we can use our ROI and do the cost of having 2 FTEs with fringe and overhead and everything, and obviously offset that by the cost of our annual contract for Ivy. One of the things, though, we almost always get asked when we say that is, well, how did your chat handle times change? And they did. The live agent chat handle time actually went up, which we anticipated it was going to, because those people that were requesting to transfer over to a live agent tended to be a more complex question.
Mhm.
So it takes a little longer to handle a more complex question. So our handle time went from average of 16 minutes to about an average of 19 minutes. But at an 87% deflection rate, we could absorb those additional 3 minutes, right? That wasn't a problem at all.
Sure.
But we were also watching our other intake types. So we were watching our phone, we were watching our email and direct entry to ensure that we weren't seeing just a
Mhm.
shift from chat to an alternate intake type, which we did not see. But again, that's how we were ensuring that we were actually getting a really, really strong ROI in this space.
That's excellent. Every time we talk about the ROI, it's so exciting. I get chills about it because it's just, we love to see this type of impact. Um, Penny, anything to add there, in your role, what did you observe? What were overall, how did it go?
Oh, yeah.
How is it
So
going?
our role in that also was just we wanted to make sure that we included time for the administrative side. We did not want to do a fix it and let it sit. So we added in making sure that we had our team, how many hours we would expect them to be working and maintaining the bot, asking it answering the inbox zero, making sure those things were still flowing. We also one of the things that we gained out of that was really learning how our customers were searching things. How were they asking for the questions so that we could be intentional in our answers and our ontology buttons. We may have put in passwords and they may be asking for it some other way. So it really helped us learn what to put in there on the way the customer was really focusing on that. And just to throw some ballpark numbers out there, like prior to this, we were averaging about 2,100 chats per month. So now we're down to about 300. So that's a huge investment and time savings for our agents.
I love to hear that. So speaking of time saving and for your agents, Glenna, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and I'm hoping you can share. So during this time, something that our attendees may remember is called COVID was happening as well. And so talk to us about the opportunities you had to utilize the Ivy platform, to assist in other areas than IT as it related to COVID and what you were doing to funnel calls at the time.
Yeah, as I'm sure all of us experienced through 2020 and beyond, was just that need to be super reactive to what was happening in the COVID space. The IT service desk, we ended up having a bolt-on side group called the COVID call center for Penn State. And it was a phone, so it was basically a call-in phone situation during core business hours where people could ask COVID questions. And we know that the answers to those questions they were ever changing, right? They could change in a moment's notice. As COVID was winding down, we had hired temporary staff to fill that. And of course, as temporary staff get closer and closer to their end date for that temporary position, you start to see staff leave, as they should, to find other opportunities. But instead of having to fill those positions to get us to kind of end of life for this COVID call center, we were able to very, very rapidly stand up a voice bot for the COVID call center. So this was a second bot at Penn State within our organization, but had a very, very different focus. But all of that, so Penny showed what our timeline looks like for the IT service desk bot, but that was our first time ever doing this, right? We had never done this before. We weren't sure what decisions we needed to make or why we needed to make those decisions as we were, working with Ivy to get those answers. But because COVID came along when it did, we had a year, we had some time to learn what a bot is, what decisions do you need to make. And we were able to stand up that voice bot very, very quickly. And allow it to meet a very, very, let's hope, niche and very short term issue. But we could do that we could stand it up and take it down in a very short time frame to meet a very, very specialized need. And that allowed us to not need to fill temporary positions, short term, hiring, training loads, all of those things that come with something like that. So it really was a lifesaver during the kind of end of life for the COVID call center.
Yes, and thank goodness, COVID, I think, is having an end of life moment as well, maybe.
Let's hope. Fingers
On the
crossed.
day. So, so and this is for both of you, Glenna, if you want to kick it off. After you implemented the bot, you had goals, you had, some KPIs in mind. Anything that you feel like you adjusted after a certain period of time? Anything you learned or needed to pivot on or re-strategize how you were measuring things based on the bot or any learnings after implementation?
Well, one of the things I think was super helpful for us, and I'm thankful to Ivy for having the knowledge to do this, was to recommend to us not to create our KPIs in those first 3 months, because that is always, at least for me, and I'm sure for many people, is to, well, let's define success now. We've never done this thing before, but let's define success now. And Ivy said, it's in your best interest to give it that 3 months. And that 3 months allowed us to, like Penny said, get to know our audience. Did we make the right decisions? We did, we used our data to decide what are those top 5 topics we're going to focus all of our energy on. But we made some assumptions about how they were going to ask the questions, how they were going to follow routes through the bot to get to the answer and things like that. And by waiting those 3 months, we actually got to see it as opposed to making that swag approach to it, right? We could see it and we could say, oh, okay, we could adjust our ontology buttons. We could do those types of things. It also allowed our team time to get to know how to do the administrative side, right? Because we hadn't done this before. So we could then choose better targets, we're measuring the right things, we're creating realistic targets, as opposed to kind of swagging it. That 3 months gave us an opportunity to make better informed decisions when we got ready to do KPIs.
Sure. So what I'm hearing is be open to adjusting and, we don't know what we don't know, allow the data to help learn and evolve with your customer. So Penny, anything to add there in terms of what was helpful or any tips and tricks now that you've been through this?
As far as helpful tips and tricks, some of the things that we really gained and learned through this process was how to make adjustments and how to do them quickly. So one of the things we discovered as a benefit was we could use the chatbot for any alert system. So like if the system was down, we threw it up on a chat and just told people right away. So that was one of the benefits we gained that we didn't really expect to gain from that. We're like, hey, well, let's just use this as an alert process too. So they don't have to ask us or ask the bot, hey, is whatever system working? We can just put it right up there. Some of the other things that we really concentrated on was the transcript. So we wanted our agents to have a transcript of how the person was asking or searching through the bot as well. So when they did go to a live agent or selected the button, hey, I really need to talk to a live agent or chat with a live agent on this, the agent already had everything they were looking for and could see, oh, okay, this is what they're looking for. with that, we had to make some adjustments just on messaging. Instead of like, please stand by for an agent, we put in there, please review, waiting for the agent to read your questions and so forth like that. So just small minor things is really what we changed in the process, but it really, again, was just helping the overall customer experience.
Sure, absolutely. And so to kind of continue down that path, when you look at that continuous improvement, what I just heard you say was there were things that Ivy was able to do for you that you didn't anticipate. It wasn't part of your initial, what we need Ivy to do list. And so as you continue to evolve and utilize it, and how do you ensure that it's going to continue to work for you? What are some things that you're addressing, or even challenges you're experiencing? What are some strategies around that improvement piece?
Sure. So early on, we developed a maintenance plan and a team. So, and defined what their roles and responsibilities were. So Glenna and I and some agents, different agents, what they had to do as far as who was going to do the reporting, who was going to look at the inbox zero, and what capacity were they looking at it to? Was it our high level ontology buttons? Was it other things that we wanted to do? We also developed like a run book to talk about how to make those changes, to put an alert up so that anybody could do it if none of the team was around. Some of the challenges and obstacles probably was really on the communication side during the implementation, just making sure that the testing, like having in line, what did we need to do as far as once we were testing, how did that feedback go back and forth? When did we expect to have a resolution on that? Maybe just tighter things in that during the implementation. Again, that was a soft launch thing. And we meet monthly with Ivy. We also, that's how we developed the service owner, service manager on our side of Penn State, so that if somebody asks or reaches out to us, word of mouth or whatever, they reach out to Glenn and I. We do a nice little presentation on how we've implemented it, and then we make the contacts with the correct folks at Ivy. We definitely use Ivy's help portal a lot to try to find some stuff out that we may not know. But yeah, those monthly meetings are crucial in addressing any of the challenges or even things that are upcoming, with that and implementing those things.
And so, Glenna, you had mentioned early on that you're the service owner, right? And so can you talk about, when you look at scaling across other areas at Penn State, what does that look like? What does that role look like for you? And how are you managing that and addressing the things that are going to be important before moving forward in other areas? Loaded question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so lots of questions. So as the service owner at Penn State, and again, that the service owner for AI covers all of the standing bots and of course future potential bots at the university. So as a service owner, there's a little bit of presentation, right? So it's an awareness thing and things like that. And a little bit of it also comes into play. As Penny said, we meet with Ivy monthly, and when there are things coming down the road that are going to impact the bot at a bot-wide level, it's that communication to all of the standing bots, collecting impacts, making sure that this one little change, because it might not impact the IT service desk bot, but maybe it'll impact, I don't know, the admissions bot. Making people aware of a change and possible impacts, and then of course helping to, I guess, broker those conversations if they need to happen to address impacts. And there's been, I mean, at least at Penn State University, I would assume it's kind of across the country and business agnostic. Chat is kind of a thing that a lot of end users are expecting to exist. And in budget situations, as they are in just about every business, the ability to reduce lower level tasks, right? To move those off to a cheaper cost per contact is always to an advantage, right? If we take all of the chats that have come in and been resolved solely by the chat bot, the cost per contact is a great deal lower than it is if it has to go to a live agent. So it's that, that shifting left in the budget space as well as in the ongoing space. And not every group, we are one of the few groups at the university that is open 24/7. And of course, in an academic setting, you've got students who kind of live in a 24/7 world, and they don't want to wait till Monday at 8 a.m. to get an answer, right? So it's helping organizations understand the possibilities that a bot can help fill, right, when they're having those pain points. And the pain points are a little different in each organization. But Penn State did stand up in the fall for bots on the academic side. And now we're in conversations about a few more bots at Penn State that are more in the student life side. So this that
Mhm.
student experience on campus kind of space, but they all have their own challenges. And as Penny said earlier, there are some things that we want to keep consistent. Penn State is branded in a very, very specific way, and we want to make sure that the branding remains the same and the look and feel remains the same, but that the tool help them to make the decisions so that they can have the appropriate customer experience in their unique spaces, because it won't always be the same. So it's a lot of, I'll say, consulting. So the service owner goes halfway between salesmanship and consulting, right? We want to help them understand if the tool is a good fit, but then also help them to think through the decisions to make sure that they have a long-term success.
Absolutely. And do you feel as though you've been able to utilize resources that Ivy provides, whether it's through that monthly meeting to kind of continue to evolve your goals and understand new use cases? Has that been helpful for you, or do you, view it as more of a, oh, we set up the bot and now we carry on, or it sounds like the relationship has continued and you continue to evolve use cases and so on as you scale.
Yeah, and I would say it's we have those monthly meetings, and as Penny said, those are
Mhm.
crucial to ensuring that we're on the right path. We know what's happening. We're getting our issues resolved. But it's also, I mean, I think our partnership with Ivy has been wonderful, because I don't have to wait for the meeting, because work doesn't wait like that, right? So it's reaching out to knowing the people well enough to say, hey Beth, or hey, who we get to know names and faces and things like that, and say, you may or may not be the right person, but here's the question. Can you get me to the right person? So I think it's about building that relationship so that you do know, you don't become just a kind of a number in the crowd, right? That you can reach out to people and get questions answered, and they'll get you on the right path. They might not be the right person, but they'll get you on the right path.
Eventually, yes. Well, great. So I would love to, we have some questions that came in from the attendees, and I'd like to, spend some time going into those and hearing your thoughts on some of those questions. And I know we covered this a little bit, but it's a toss-up. Who wants to take it? Can you tell us a little bit about, are there any big lessons you learned, right, throughout this process? If you had to do it again, would you do it the same way?
So big lessons learned. Yes, we would definitely do it the same way. I think the lessons that we learned in this was really just more about learning our customer interactions. And so because we're an academic area, our LMS system, our faculty would ask a question towards the LMS system versus a student would. So we really had to really build out, and we didn't think of this much at the beginning, but eventually we built out multiple layers within our ontology of, hey, this is a faculty, what would they ask? This is a student, what would they ask? Questions are completely different, answers are completely different.
Right.
So it's just really the learning process, and that the implementation itself was very smooth. Like I said, Ivy gave us all the tools that we needed, all the checklists that we needed, helped us with typical guidelines, typical timelines to follow. So yeah, we would probably do the same thing we did.
Well,
Same
that's a good answer. I love to hear that. Glenna, you touched on this a little bit when you mentioned, other areas of the organization have moved forward and implemented Ivy. But can you touch on that a little bit more? You're the service owner, and I heard you use the word broker. So specifically for admissions and financial aid.
Yeah, so Penn State did stand up for academic focused bots in the fall. So it was admissions, financial aid, bursar, and registrar. And for those of you that are in an academic setting, you know what those 4 different groups do, but they're very different. They have very different needs, and the personalities of those groups are very different. So the IT service desk, we made the decision that an end user, the customer experience decision that an end user, if they didn't get an answer in the bot, could then transition over to a live agent. That's not going to be possible in every organization, right? Because one, they don't have people that may not even know how to do chat interactions in an IT sense, or they don't have staffing that will allow them to be actively present to take a live chat at any point, right? So we did work, Penny and I sat down and worked through what we call a run book. But it's a like best practices document that we share with them, and it just helps them to think about the decisions, right? We don't tell them that you have to have a live agent. We say, think about how you want the customer experience to behave, right? Do you want it to go to a live agent? Do you want it to create a ticket? Do you want it to just display a phone number? You know, so there are different ways in which you can get it to behave, right? That kind of output path. So it was working with them to understand what are the decisions we don't want them making. Like, you can't make the bot purple. Penn State doesn't allow that. I can assure you, all of you, Penn State does not allow purple. But it's very distinct blue. It's not just any blue you want, it's Penn State blue. And we've already given it a name, and we've already given it a basic look and feel. So we don't want people changing those things, because we don't want the end user to have to care where they went to ask a question. We want the admissions bot, when you go to their page, to look like the IT bot, to look like the bursar bot, but the behavior might be a little bit different. And we wanted them to think through those things. And to share what we felt were the kind of the core of our success, right? Is that it's not a set it and forget it. It's you know, you got to think long term, not just out of the gate, you know, those things. So that's the not only kind of that word of mouth, like Penny said, we get a lot of people that heard it from someone who heard it from someone who heard it from someone. But also going to different venues within Penn State and doing presentations. We have a Tech Pros conference that comes in June. We've done presentations there to say, hey, did you know Penn State has bots? And if you're thinking about one, let's come together and do it, instead of 24 campuses going and doing their own thing, right? Let's do this together in a way that makes sense.
Right. So it doesn't need to be a one size fits all at the department level, but it needs to be a unified communication platform for students, faculty, and staff, right? Because as we know, it's all the same. Admissions, IT, registrar, it's one big Penn State. So thank you for that. Another question that was asked was, and Glenna, maybe you can speak to this. What, if any, changes have you needed to make to your existing knowledge management practices? Did you feel like you needed to rework any of your knowledge bases or your content to accommodate the chatbot implementation?
I think we were fortunate in that we had implemented KCS about a year before we started to move down the chat path. And for those of you who might not know about this knowledge-centered support, it's the way it is created is question by question. So it's very compartmentalized, which really helped feed the bot, right? Because people ask questions in a very compartmentalized way, right? They don't say, tell me everything about your identity and access management process. They say, how do I reset my password? Right? And our knowledge was already created that way. So that really kind of created a very strong foundation for the bot. Now, of course, and Penny could probably speak to this a little better, as we were in that learning phase, we might not have the questions phrased in quite the way we wanted them to. So we had to tweak as we found kind of patterns in things that were happening. And also to understand that a bot is not intended to answer every question. We intentionally said this is not an appropriate question for a bot. And we chose not, that's just moves right over to a live agent, that type of thing. So it's just being intentional.
Yeah, absolutely. Penny, anything to add there?
Yeah, so we also decided that if it was steps that were like 5 or less steps, instead of pointing them to a knowledge base, we would just add that right in the answer. So they could just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And, you know, just making sure that those were ones that we chose that most likely weren't going to change, and making
Mhm.
sure we had those recorded and documented. So if something would change along the way, we would change our multi-factor system. We knew how to change those ones as well. So those are just some of the decisions we made too early on, is just, let's just go ahead and put the answer right out there.
Sure. And you know, and I remember when we moved forward and started implementing enrollment management, they had very different ways to manage their content. It was more website based and stuff. And so, you know, really being able to accommodate the different organizations within the organization, you know, allowed us to scale across other areas. And we did talk about this, but one question that came up multiple times from the audience is, you know, is the implementation done by Ivy, or did you rely on consulting partners? So if you wanted to speak a little bit to that, or reiterate kind of what that looked like for you.
100% through Ivy. We did not go out and need a consulting partner for that. Now, we did go and look at what others were doing, just to make sure that we were in line. You know, we relied heavily on Ivy and the partners they already had to make sure how those implementations were working. But we don't have another consulting firm that we deal with.
Right. Well, ladies, this has been fantastic. Can't thank you enough for sharing your knowledge and sharing what your experience has been implementing a chatbot, and what your results have been. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You'll see a QR code here on the screen that will lead you to additional resources. But if we did not get to your question, we will be sending resources, answers in response following this webinar. And we look forward to hearing from some of you in the audience, and continuing the conversation about the Ivy platform. Glenna and Penny, thank you so much. This was fantastic. We really appreciate it. So have a great day, everyone. And
Thanks.
thanks for being here. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.